She could tell you exactly what everyone needed from her, what she was responsible for. She couldn't tell you who she was. The layoff hit Stella, 54, harder than expected, like someone had snatched the floor from beneath her. The new circumstances of her reality had not yet calibrated. Her compass spun uncontrollably as she tried to ground herself. The government job was supposed to be the black woman's surefire blueprint for a stable and good life. Everyone told her it was guaranteed, which was why she chose it as a career. For 22 years, she worked it faithfully, dutifully, and never complained, slowly counting down to the cherry on top of her ice cream sundae. Retirement. But her fate changed today via email. Stella was no longer needed. Unease took away the perceived stability that previously brought her comfort. In the end, the visual of her professional life that fitted inside a 15 by 12-inch banker's box was an unsolvable equation. On the train ride home, Stella sat in her normal seat. The car was filled with tired-looking commuters and students wrapping up their days. The rhythmic click-clacking of the wheels along the tracks and the gentle vibration of the engine lulled some passengers to sleep. Last day at work? The lady sitting across from Stella tilted her head towards the box between Stella's feet. It carried office knickknacks and family portraits taken over the years. Laid off from the government after 22 years. Stella normally wouldn't share her business with a stranger, but a new frustration was forming, and she needed to release. Oh, I'm sorry. I heard about the mass layoffs on the news. Do you know what you're going to do? I have no clue. It was unexpected. Got a promotion and a raise 2 weeks ago, and I'm still wrapping my head around it. I've been there for so long. I raised my kids while working there. I think I'm feeling a little lost. I can imagine. My sister went through the same thing. She dedicated her life to her old job, moved across country for it, and lost a boyfriend because she was always at work instead of with him, only for her position to get eliminated. It threw her into depression. Her therapist suggested she was having an identity crisis and had her do this exercise to figure out who she was outside of the roles she occupied in life, like outside of her job, being a daughter, a sister, or a girlfriend. Like at her core, who was she? It turned out that she never liked her job, but sacrificed for it because of the pressure from our father. She's much happier now. Oh, this is my stop. Good luck. Stella watched the woman exit the train, then asked herself, who am I? Nothing came to mind except wife, mother, and a former federal employee. She knew where she came from, but couldn't figure out what it meant to be her, outside of what she did for everyone else. The question hit her somewhere deep, and by the time she arrived home, she was sliding down the rabbit hole. Over the next 2 weeks, Stella cooked, cleaned, organized, and rearranged until there was nothing left to do in the house. She took herself on shopping sprees, anything to fill the space her job left. Since Stella's husband Russ made good money, there was no hurry to find a new job, and she thought of possibly retiring. For 22 years, her life was on a schedule, filled with routines that kept her household running. Every moment synchronized from work to school to the children's activities. Playdates, choir rehearsals, soccer tournaments kept her busy. When her kids got older and had their own lives, she worked overtime to fill those gaps. She spent her life doing for others while never understanding herself. Who am I? The question now revealed an insecurity that existed below the surface. Inspiration didn't wake her up each morning with a new song. Responsibility did. There were no Picassos being birthed in her soul, only the daily to-do list, making sure Russ went to his annual physical, sneaking into her oldest son's apartment to see if he had groceries. No one forced her to do those things. She wanted to do them, and yet there was always a subtle note of insignificance hidden in her life's harmony. One night at dinner, while watching her husband Russ swirl a piece of steak into his mashed potatoes, she asked, "Honey, who am I to you?" Russ shrugged his shoulders. "What do you mean? You're my wife, the mother of my children." "I know, but who am I beyond that?" Russ put down his fork, giving her his full attention. She watched him as he watched her, observing how his broad shoulders expanded inside his perfectly fitted button up shirt. "You are kind, caring, organized. You did an excellent job raising our kids. You keep me together. But what is this about? Why are you asking me this?" It was something I heard on the train the day I lost my job. It made me think about who I am outside of what I do for everyone, outside of being a wife and a mother, you know. And honestly, I feel like I've lived for my family and old job, but not for myself. Russ dropped his shoulders and softness emerged in his eyes. He reached across the table and grabbed Stella's hand. "Maybe losing your job was a blessing in disguise. God's way of saying it is time for you to discover what is inside. You've kept this family together. Take this time to find yourself. I've got us, so you don't have to worry about anything. Just focus on you." Stella pulled out the journal that her sister-in-law had given to her and wrote, "Who am I?" at the top of the first page. Everything that came to mind involved someone else. Getting her brain to think only of herself was an issue. What did she love about herself? She gave to the homeless and even kept spare coats in the car during the winter to hand out. When her children were young, she volunteered for all their field trips and was the team mom when they played sports. She kept her sister's kids for 6 months when her sister was recovering from an illness. So she was caring. Should that go into the journal? It felt so generic. Who am I? The question bothered her more than it should have. It sounded like the makings of a tragic play. The black woman with no identity. She lived, she died. Who cares? Frustrated, she put the journal down and went outside for a walk. One of her neighbors, an older man most likely in his 70s, was sitting on his front porch. He had moved in about 6 months ago, and she had never introduced herself. Stella walked a few feet to his house. "Hello," she greeted. He looked her dead in the eyes, then abruptly rushed inside his house. "Oh." She stepped back, a little shocked, but figured he had to go to the bathroom or something. The next morning, Stella went out for another walk, liking how exercising made her feel. When she was in front of her neighbor's house, he was just coming outside, getting ready to sit down. But upon seeing Stella, he paused in midair, then straightened and went back inside. Stella stood stunned. How rude, she thought, then brushed it off as if he was having a bad day. She decided not to take it personally, but when the same thing happened the following day, his avoidance made her even more determined. Stella had a new mission: to slay the dragon inside her grumpy old neighbor. and she would not stop until he spoke. I am going to kill him with kindness. Her new focus gave her a reprieve in her struggle to find herself. Russ, have you met our new neighbor on the corner? She asked her husband after several consecutive days of their cat and mouse game. Some mornings, through her window, she would see him on the porch, but he would be gone by the time she reached his house. No, I haven't. Only seen him a few times while driving by. Well, I've been trying to meet him for over a week now, and every time I go over there, he goes in the house without speaking back. Maybe he wants to be left alone. I know, but I have this feeling that he could really use a friend. I just need to figure out a way to reach him. She walked away in thought. The next morning, she had a new strategy. Stella picked the heaviest apples from the tree in her backyard, washed them, and placed them in a basket with a note. You can run, but you can't hide. These are fresh from my garden, and they are sweet. She signed it, Stella, your neighbor in the gray house. At 7:02 a.m., Stella placed the basket on his porch, then ran back home and watched from the window. Minutes later, at 7:05 a.m. on the dot, his front door opened, and out he came with the newspaper tucked underneath his arm and a coffee mug. When he saw the basket, his shoulders dropped. He looked at her house and stared. Fearing that he could see her spying, Stella jumped behind the curtain and closed her eyes. A few moments later, when she peeked again, he and the basket were gone. He was likely throwing the apples away. Sadness swept over Stella. The challenge of trying to turn him into a friend gave her an excuse to avoid the actual issue at hand. You silly woman, she scolded herself, then sat down in her favorite chair and opened her journal. Minutes passed, and the pages remained blank. Why was the question so hard? Thinking of herself differently was difficult. All her life, she had been taking care of people, making sure everyone had what they needed. She got her first job at 15 so she could pay for her little brother's basketball uniforms and sneakers. That had been her pattern her entire life, feeling responsible for those around her. It was partly why she took her government job all those years ago, because it was the responsible thing to do. The next morning, Stella stepped onto her porch for her morning walk, with the intention of walking in the opposite direction of her normal route, because she didn't have the energy to deal with her mean neighbor. Surprisingly, on the porch table was an apple pie in the most beautiful ceramic dish. She could tell it was still warm because steam was sifting through the slits on the top. At first, she was perplexed about where it came from. Then a smile formed on her face. Her apples. Stella ran into the house, grabbing two small plates, forks, and napkins. After getting everything arranged on the tray, she carried it to her neighbor's house. It wasn't 7:05 a.m. yet, but the old man was already sitting outside, and there was an extra mug on the small table next to him. Pie? Stella cautiously approached, making sure she was reading the situation correctly. Have a seat. I hope you like your coffee black. He smiled at her, which filled Stella with joy. There is no other way to drink it. She set the tray down, then took a seat. My name is Stella. My husband Russ and I live over there, as you know. She pointed to her house. Did you make this beautiful pie? It looks and smells delicious. I owned a bakery with my wife for 35 years. I stopped baking when she passed 10 months ago and moved here, trying to get away from everything that reminded me of her, including our bakery. It wasn't the same without her. Oh, I'm so sorry. Uh, Stella paused, realizing that she didn't know his name. Daryl Jacks. I'm so sorry for your loss, Mr. Jacks. Makes me feel foolish for bugging you how I did. You just wanted peace, and I interrupted that. I'm sorry. Don't be. I owe you an apology. He cleared his throat. Seeing you, that spark in your eyes, that quiet determination, the compassion in your spirit reminded me of her, my Eileen. That's why I avoided you all those times. And I'm sorry for that. I was so mean to you. Why did you keep coming back? Stella thought about it for a second. Because you look like you could use a friend, and I felt responsible for making that happen. You know, when you left those apples on my porch, it hit me dead in the heart. My wife Eileen used to pick all the apples for our pies from our garden. Your leaving them on my porch felt like a message from her that she didn't want me to stop doing what we both love. So thank you. Thanks for not giving up on this old man who needs a friend. Stella spent most of the morning getting to know her new friend, Mr. Jacks. While eating the delicious pie, she learned about his life and she shared some of hers. Like her, he was lost, trying to find his new normal. Later at home, Stella sat down in her chair and picked up her journal, then wrote, I'm quietly determined and compassionate. I thrive when I see other people happy. It was the first time she was satisfied with how she thought about herself, realizing that she could not separate from her roles because they reflected her love. Seeing people around her happy filled her with joy. It was in her DNA. However, Stella knew there was more. God had left her breadcrumbs to find the gifts and talents hidden inside her. And with time on her hands and her quiet determination, she was going to uncover more of her truth. Stella flipped to a new page in her journal and thought about where to start. Mr. Jacks promised to teach her how to bake his delicious pies, so she listed baking at the top. There were so many possibilities and things to explore, like writing, fashion, taking a missions trip, going back to college. It was going to take time for her to understand fully who she was. She was going to continue to pour into others, but first would spend some time thinking about herself because she had only scratched the surface of the woman that she was building in her mind. Stella was becoming, and she was going to have fun during the process. If this story spoke to you, you're not alone. Subscribe for a new uplifting story every week.